Folks, we have with us Roysdale Forde joining us today. We are privileged to have the backdrop of Washington, D.C., and we're going to be discussing a number of issues. First and foremost is that meeting with congressmen that took place quite recently. Roysdale, you were part of the leader of the opposition's delegation to that congressional meeting of congressmen at Capitol Hill. How did that go in your own estimation? What was brought to the table?
Thank you, Sherrod, for having this interview with me. I believe that it was a very important meeting. We were able to highlight in a very clear and concise way issues affecting Guyanese at large. We were able to deal with it from the point of view of the government repeated infractions of the Constitution, its undermining of the rule of law, its lack of commitment and dedication to pursuing the constitutional objectives of ensuring that we have an independent judiciary. We were able to underscore quite clearly the government's refusal to engage in the process of consultation. Those issues were presented in the wider context of the fact that the Guyana Constitution is built on two fundamental principles: inclusive governance and consultation. We were able to show that the government has engaged in a repeated course of conduct. It demonstrated the refusal to engage the leader of the opposition as a constitutional actor and his corresponding person under the Constitution to engage in consultations. We were able to point out the issue and the failure of the government to do so even after the court would have ruled that the president must act with alacrity and urgency to engage in consultation to fill the offices of Chancellor and Chief Justice. Then we were able to contextualize it in context of the fact that this is a requirement under the Constitution, and we were able to highlight the specific example of the government's failure to engage in consultation with respect to a very important constitutional commission, the Human Rights Commission, because we were able to show that the government is repeatedly not only refusing to engage in consultation, but refusing to engage and give effect to the concept of inclusive governance. We were able to also bring forward, in my opinion, the need for the establishment of the Human Rights Commission, the role and significant purpose it plays and functions under the Constitution, be able to generate information, generate assessments of the rights of the people of all ethnic groups, the ability of this commission as designated under the Constitution to make assessments in terms of government's inequality and the unfair distribution of resources. They were quite upset and quite surprised that the government seemed to be pursuing this course of conduct. So I believe that we were able to impress upon them the significance of what is happening in the country at large.
Excellent. And I know, folks, some of you have seen some of what we would have seen at this side of the Atlantic at this meeting at Congress, for all intents and purposes, with congressmen here, led by the lead Congressman Hakeem Jeffrey, lead Democratic Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. What is your own sense of their takeaway from this very, very important high-level meeting that we've had?
Well, I believe that we have been able to quite clearly sensitize them. I believe that they will be more keen and more receptive to the possible misrepresentations and the government's efforts to lobby them to conclude that they are engaged in a very fair and equitable distribution of the resources, that they are proper democracy, that they accept the principles of democracy. I believe that we were able to point out, in addition to the matters that I mentioned, we were able to press upon them, and they recognize the importance for a credible voters list and the use of biometrics at the place of poll as mechanisms that will guarantee and secure the citizens' right to freedom of expression and the citizens' right to vote, which they consider most fundamental. I believe that we can see and possibly look forward to their expressions of support in that regard particularly.
Excellent. One of the things that came out of this meeting, this very important meeting on Capitol Hill, I remember in the meeting, I think it was one of the senators who said, one of the congresswomen, as a matter of fact, Maxine Waters, who said, and she said it repeatedly, "I hear you, I'm with you." What was your takeaway from that intervention?
I believe that Maxine Walters, a respected and distinguished congresswoman, was communicating the fact that she was not only understanding the issues, but as a senior politician and an African American woman, that she could have understood the degrees of oppression, understand the degrees of discrimination, marginalization that was taking place. I believe that from her own independent assessment, she was able to come to the conclusion that we were not fabricating these matters that we were raising. I believe that she has an independent constituency from which she would have drawn much information and be able to test of the veracity of what we say. I believe that she's come to the conclusion that, having regard to the government's course of conduct, it does not match the rhetoric against what is the evidence in relation to compliance with the Constitution, in relation to distribution of resources, and really the overall portrayal of themselves as a respected ally of the United States.
Another high point for me, at least, being in that meeting, was when I think Congressman Hakeem Jeffrey said that he wants to see as far as possible inclusivity. Might have been the inverse way, inclusivity as far as possible in Guyana. What did you think of that very profound statement?
No, but I believe that, again, that was a very important statement by the Democratic leader. I believe for him to say that he wants to see inclusivity, I believe is indicative of the fact that he would have himself similarly concluded, based on all the available objective information, but despite the government claims to be inclusive, that it is not so. They in fact indicated that they would have had access to newspapers. They would have been seeing and following the events in Guyana, and I believe that this would have happened over time, particularly using 2020 as a starting point. They were able to conclude that the resources are not being equitably distributed. They were able to conclude that Parliament is not functioning effectively. They were able to conclude that Guyana Police Force is a rogue organization. They were able to conclude that there is no effort to ensure that the government acts in accordance with the rule of law. There is no effort to ensure that the separation of powers function and that the judiciary functions as an independent organization. I believe those are very important areas of concern for them. I believe in terms of economic freedom and accessing the resources of the country and opportunities, they believe that it is not being done in a fair and objective manner.
In that meeting also on Capitol Hill, one of the things I think we heard all of the congressmen having an eager sense of wanting more of is the opposition's plan for governance. I think repeatedly we heard them asking, as we detailed a number of issues in that meeting. It is really and truly, in my humble estimation, is an appetite of Washington to hear what the opposition would do again when we go before the electorate, and if successful in office.
Yes, and we were able to lay over, the delegation had prepared a document which captured the framework of what we thought would be the answer to the sort of crisis that is taking place in Guyana, the misgovernance, the bad economic plans, and the sort of marginalization that is taking place. They seem very eager to receive more information in it, and we undertook to supply a more detailed document which will capture that. But we had submitted to them a very sufficient statement for the purposes of that meeting at that time, the elements of that plan.
Excellent. We are here in Washington, and there are a number of things happening. There was a very high-powered meeting at Capitol Hill, as we said, and we are against the literal backdrop of this very historic Washington Conference on Guyana. Usually we see lots of the folks who hear us today, we see them in the comment section. We've had a chance to see them face to face. We see a lot of bobbing heads even now. This is a very important conference, and that has taken place here. We heard from a number of speakers. What is your own sense of what has taken place here, and perhaps how we can move forward?
I'm sure I would consider that this conference is really, in my opinion, signals the manifestation of a number of individuals deep concern for the decay that is taking place in the country. I don't believe that we've had a conference of this nature before that would have captured the leading persons in the diaspora, politicians, social activists, people skilled in governance, people skilled in economics and banking, sitting parliamentarians of Guyana. I believe that this indicates what I would want to consider a watershed moment, where we would see going forward a realignment of our direction. I believe that it is indicative of the fact that we are gaining momentum and coming together to strategize in a clear way to determine a vision that will effectively bring to an end the PPP's misrule in Guyana. I believe in that context this is a very significant event. I hope that when we look back over time, we will be able to point our hands on this day and these days and point out the persons who stood in the breach at this very important moment in the development of Guyana. I would have said that the change started here.
Excellent, excellent. The change started here. No doubt the diaspora plays a very important role in all we do in Guyana, not only in terms of likes and shares, but hard work on the ground, raising funds for political work, which takes a lot of money, making their voices heard, engaging their congressmen and congresswomen, which has brought us this forum here. What do you say to them? What do you say to the folks at home in terms of just where we are in this moment in our nation's history? Look, this conference caused the whole cabinet to almost move to Washington a week ago. So love for us where we are at this juncture in time, and really and truly the importance of the diaspora. Lots of them been talking about just, you're hurrying go back in government, we want to come back home and do some stuff.
Well, Sherrod, I believe that the diaspora is very important. If there's ever time that the diaspora is important, it is now. And when I say by diaspora, I'm speaking across all the ethnic groups of the Guyanese people who live abroad. This is an opportunity in which we could bring to bear the fact that Guyana is no longer the Guyana of old. Guyana is now a major international player, and we must bring to attention international countries, countries abroad, their leaders, and bring them to them and sensitize the developments that is happening at home. The government wants to portray itself as compliant, as fair and proper, and I believe an essential arsenal in the weaponry to break that sort of perception that the government wants to perpetuate in the diaspora. I believe that the fact that they are proximate to the centers of international power and they have the resources and technical expertise which we at home may not be in a position to provide, I believe it provides the opportunity for intense and deep collaboration that will only work when we ultimately see the results of it, which is the removal of the PPP from government. I believe also this program here is a part of a discussion, and I would hope that this conference could actually have a follow-up segment that deals with effectively how we could capture in a very serious way the strengths of the diaspora, including attracting them home. And we must be able to start the process of articulating in the National Assembly, and I hope that we will do it, and our party will do it. That is both the AFC and the APNU coalition, to start articulating policies that would see objective standards being set so we could attract the diaspora to start coming back home. One of the significant things that I spoke about yesterday in my presentation is the concept of displacement. And I believe when we see what is happening across the different sectors of Guyana, the government wants, despite the economic boom that is taking place, they're putting new plans in place, either to improve the skills of Guyanese at home, or at the same time to attract skilled Guyanese abroad to return home. We seem to be creating an economic boom that the people who will benefit most from it will be people who they want to attract into Guyana, and not the long-standing Guyanese and people who are entitled to citizenship, whether by parents or grandparents. I believe that is the emphasis that the government should be focusing on. You see, as we pointed out yesterday also, Sherrod, these things are not being done by accident. No sensible, sane government with such a rapidly growing economy would refuse to turn to its diaspora. But we deliberately are looking at everywhere else. And I believe it's part of a plan to bring people into the country, not only for its economic development, but for their own political sustenance. And I believe that the diaspora should stand up and start demanding that policies be put in place in Guyana that will facilitate their return and the equal access to the resources and opportunities that are taking place in Guyana.
Excellent. Senior Counsel Roysdale Forde, I really want to thank you for spending this time with us. Folks, we're on the sidelines of the Washington Conference on Guyana. Thanks for joining us.